Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel for another midweek mystery video. Today we're going to be talking about the disappearance of Erin Marie Gilbert, a 24-year-old American woman who vanished whilst attending the Girdwood Forest Fair in Girdwood, Alaska on the 1st of July 1995. Almost 25 years on and there are still no answers. I've been in contact with Erin's older sister Stephanie, who runs the Finding Erin Marie Gilbert page on Facebook, which I will leave linked down below, and she refuses to give up on finding out what happened to her sister. I would also highly recommend having a listen to the podcast Alaska Unsolved if you want a really deep dive into this case, as well as interviews with Stephanie, some of Erin's friends, even the lead detective on the case and other people as well. This is the kind of story that needs as many eyes and ears as possible. The word needs to be spread about Erin's story in an attempt to get some answers. This is a really frustrating case because there are so few leads to go off of, but somebody out there knows something. Erin was born on the 4th of May 1971 in San Francisco, California, which would make her 48, nearly 49 years old if she was alive today. She was 5'11", around 145 pounds, a Caucasian female with brown hair and hazel eyes. She was incredibly beautiful. In the Alaska Unsolved podcast, Stephanie describes Erin as athletically talented, extremely smart, she did well in school and she did well athletically. She was a basketball player but also played volleyball and is described as kind and confident but also very responsible. She was one of 3 sisters and they were all super close-knit, they got along really well. Throughout most of their childhood they lived with their mother in Everett, Washington it seems, but eventually Erin decided to move down to San Francisco to live with her dad. In the early 90s, Stephanie moved to Anchorage, Alaska with her new husband and son, where they were going to live at the Elmendorf Air Force Base. In the autumn of 1994, Erin wasn't too sure what she wanted to do with her life, so Stephanie offered for her to move up to Alaska to live with her for a bit, see if she liked it. And so she does. Erin takes a job as a nanny for a family that Stephanie knew in Alaska, and according to Anchorage Daily News, had plans to attend beauty school in just a few weeks. She would mostly hang out with Stephanie and her husband and their friends, but eventually wanted to start going out to meet new people, make her own friends, so that's what she did. One night she heads out on her own on a mission to find her own people in Alaska, heading to a bar called Chilkoot Charlie's in Anchorage. There she meets a guy and gives him her phone number. This would turn out to be a man called Dave Combs. Later that week he calls Erin and invites her to the Girdwood Forest Fair that Saturday, the 1st of July 1995. The Girdwood Forest Fair is a family fair and annual event in the resort town of Girdwood, Alaska, located 36 miles south of Anchorage. The fair website now states that the Forest Fair features Alaskan artists, handcrafted items, exotic food and entertainers from all over Alaska, and I can only assume it was the same or very similar back in 1995. It was started in the 80s as an attempt to bring more people to Girdwood in the summer months, as it was a town best known for its winter skiing. And it worked. Thousands of people would attend this fair annually, and it was the perfect spot for a date, a fun day out. Girdwood in general is known to be an incredibly safe town, the kind of place you could walk around alone at night and have no issues whatsoever, which makes what happened to Erin there even crazier. On the day in question, Dave picks Erin up from her sister's house on Elmendorf Air Force Base around 4 o'clock, and Stephanie assumes they headed straight to the fair from there. Before Erin left, her nephew told her to take the cell phone the family had recently bought, but Erin said no, she'll be fine. According to Google Maps today, it's around a 55-minute drive from the Air Force Base to the Girdwood Forest Fair, which is located at mile 2.2 on the Alyeska Highway. Erin was dressed appropriately for an outdoor date that day. She was wearing a black leather jacket, black and white striped shirt, mountain boots and black jeans. Now they definitely made it to the fair. They were last seen at around 5:30 PM at a vendor table, Erin having a conversation with the vendor for a few minutes. It was a hair design and face painting table and Erin was asking questions about piercings as she intended to get her belly button pierced. As they weren't doing piercings at the table that day, they took down her details. The podcast Alaska Unsolved does feature conversations with the 2 vendors that Erin spoke to that day, and both made the comment that the man that Erin was seen with was a clean-cut, military-style man, that the 2 didn't really seem to match up as a couple. One of the vendors actually questioned in the podcast as to whether it was actually Dave that Erin was with at that point. Stephanie described Dave when he picked Erin up as having long hair, but this man was very clean-cut. From what I can gather, the police did look into this angle, but it didn't pan out. As far as I'm aware, they're operating under the impression that this man that she was with at the vendor table was indeed Dave. They were then seen in the beer garden around 6:15 p.m. by 6 of Dave's friends. Eventually these friends went back to a dinner party at a cabin, and Dave and Erin head back to his car around 6:45 p.m. And this is where things get a little bit strange. According to Dave, when they got back to his car, the battery was dead because he'd accidentally left his car lights on the entire time. He says to Erin that he's going to walk to a nearby friend's cabin and try and get help, and he leaves her there. He walks for 2 hours apparently, but is unable to find the cabin, so returns to the car, and of course, Erin is gone. But this time when he tries the ignition, the car actually starts. He said that he returned to the fair to search for Erin until about 1 a.m, but was unable to find her. Dave told the Daily News in 1995, "I actually thought she might be mad at me. I assumed she'd taken off." The next morning, Dave called Stephanie's house at 7 a.m. to check if Erin made it home, but of course, Stephanie checks and she hadn't. It was quite obvious that she hadn't come home that night from the state of her room. Stephanie said that she immediately knew that something was wrong. She said that there was no way that Erin would have not called her and not come home. If she needed a lift, she would have asked for one. So Stephanie and her husband drive down to the Girdwood Forest Fair themselves that very next day, and they have Erin's name announced on stage, asking people to keep an eye out for her. They search the festival and the nearby woods themselves to no avail, eventually calling the state troopers to help with the search, but they actually get no response from the troopers for several days. No one turns up to help. 3 days in, they decide to go to the media for help, and only at that point do the police get involved. It was on the 6th of July that state troopers did their first proper search of the area. They used search dogs as well as helicopters, as well as searching the area by foot obviously, but sadly they found no sign of Erin. The woods were scoured in case she decided to go for a hike by herself. They were looking in places that people could reach mainly by foot. But Erin had only been in Alaska for 1 year. She didn't know the area very well, and she never would have gone into the woods alone. She was a sensible, responsible person. If she did go into the woods, it likely wasn't of her own volition. Erin was last seen in a very busy area, surrounded by hundreds, if not thousands, of people. She was a 5'11" woman, she was very slim, she was the kind of person who would stand out in a crowd, and she was also the kind of person who would put up a hell of a fight. She was an athlete, she was a strong person. How did nobody see anything? An article on medium.com that I found from 2018 states that since authorities began keeping records in 1988, 60,700 people have been reported missing in Alaska. That's 5 people reported as missing every year per 1,000 residents. Each year, an average of 2.25 people disappear in Alaska, which is twice the national USA average. And Erin is just one of thousands. But why do so many people go missing in Alaska? There are a lot of reasons for that. Alaska is a vast, untamed wilderness for the most part. It draws adventurers from around the world who want to explore the nature. It's also the kind of place that people run to hide, whether it's from the law or their responsibilities. But it is a state of extremes. Extreme weather, extreme nature, extreme predators. It's very easy to get lost in Alaska, and I do mean just get lost. Wander off the beaten path and you'll find yourself in the middle of nowhere. The numbers were also boosted by the amount of commercial fishing that happens in Alaska, which is widely regarded to be one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. If a boat sinks or disappears, that's a number of people reported as missing all at once. As Lieutenant Randy McPherson, the cold case investigator on Erin's case, is quoted as saying, "We live in a very big place and a very rural place, and it's, I don't want to say easy for people to disappear, but people get lost here and it's hard to find them." The missing aren't always missing in Alaska because of foul play. It's usually down to nature, but that's very unlikely to be the case for Erin here. After the initial search for Erin, that was kind of it. No trace of her was ever found in the area, and eventually it just becomes yet another cold case. In the immediate aftermath of her disappearance, there was talk of her taking a sudden vacation or trip away, but that was dismissed pretty quickly because Erin just wasn't the kind of person to do that. She definitely would have mentioned plans to take a trip away, and the fact that she's never been found backs that up pretty well. I know exactly what you're all thinking here. The obvious suspect is the last person seen with her, the man who left her whilst he went on a mysterious 2-hour-long walk, Dave Combs. But it's very important to note that he is not officially considered a suspect in this case. There are actually 0 suspects in Erin's disappearance. Lieutenant McPherson told Dateline that they have attempted to reach Dave Combs multiple times for questioning, as he was the last person to see her as far as they know. He did give a few initial statements when she disappeared, but he hasn't been in contact since. It also hasn't been in contact with anyone from Erin's family. There's very little information available from what I could find as to why Dave was never considered a serious suspect here. I'm not sure if his car was searched or if there was much investigation made into him at all. Apparently at one point he did make a trip to the police station to take a polygraph test, but he ended up leaving before he took it. This is a very difficult case because there is very limited evidence, and without a body it's hard to say whether Erin's disappearance was a result of an accident or foul play. No one can be charged with murder or anything until a body or some very strong evidence is found to suggest that this was the case. As I said before, a lot of people in Alaska are missing as the result of the environment rather than as a result of other people. At this point, they're just kind of hoping that somebody's going to come across a set of human remains and the case can be given a new lease of life. All in all, this is still an open case and therefore detectives can't share much information about it, so what I have to share with you here is fairly limited. I've already mentioned the name Randy McPherson a few times by this point. Like I said, he was the cold case detective in charge of Erin's case. In 2002, Alaska's Cold Case Investigation Unit was opened with help from grants from the federal government. They were tasked with attempting to solve 100+ cases dating all the way back to the 1950s, including Erin Gilbert's. At first, there were 4 detectives on the unit, and they were successful in solving a number of cases with help from some modern technology. But in 2015, the cold case unit was discontinued due to a lack of funding, only to be opened again in 2017 with McPherson at its helm, and as the only detective on the unit. He's currently working on reanalysing evidence using modern technology, but it's slow work with just one person and 100 cases. He's still dedicated to finding out what happened with Erin, but with a lack of new leads, there's just not much that can be done. It's a case of waiting for somebody to come across her body, and it's thought that she's definitely dead by this point. Erin was not the kind of person to run away and start a new life. She had no reason to. She had a really good life, so the fact that she might have run away isn't really even a consideration in this case. It's definitely thought that something happened to her. So with that, let's have a look at some potential theories in this. And it all really balances on one thing. Was Dave Combs telling the truth about the events of that evening, or was he not? Did he really spend 2 hours wandering around trying to find his friend's cabin to borrow jumper cables? Why did he not take Erin with him? Did anybody see him walking around for 2 hours? On the Finding Erin Marie Gilbert Facebook page, Stephanie actually posted a list of 20 questions that she would like to ask Dave. And instead of reading them all out, I'm going to put them on the screen here so you can pause and read if you wish. There will also, of course, be a link down below to the page if you want to go find it through there. A lot of them are fairly obvious questions. Why did you leave Erin for 2 hours instead of having her go with you? Did you drive around looking for her? Why did you walk out and not take the polygraph? Again, I would like to stress that he is not a suspect in this case. There are no suspects in this case. But as the last person to see Erin, it's strange that he's not willing to help with the investigation further. Let's say that he is telling the truth and he did indeed leave Erin waiting by the car that evening for 2 hours. Perhaps Erin decided to walk back to the fair to entertain herself for a bit. Maybe she met somebody else and hit it off with them. Again, in the Alaska Unsolved podcast, there is a really interesting interview with a woman who was a bartender at a local bar in Girdwood, which I think was called Max's. For some reason I didn't write it down. Max's was known for holding the fair after parties. Everyone would congregate there after the fair to drink and have fun. This bartender spoke about how she thought she saw Erin in the bar that evening. As I've mentioned, Erin was really striking looking. She had this dark hair, dark features, she was supermodel tall and incredibly slim. She was the kind of person who you'd likely pay attention to if she walked into a room. Is it possible that Erin was in the bar that evening? I mean, of course it's possible, which begs the question, who could she have run into that night that brought her harm? Or did she get drunk and end up wandering the streets alone? Did somebody see her and offer her a lift with more sinister intentions? Or did she simply wander off the beaten path and end up in some kind of trouble? With such little evidence in this case, there are so many open questions. We really can only speculate. The big question I have that Google couldn't give me a clear answer on was, is it possible for a flat car battery to suddenly start working again without help after a couple of hours, especially a car from the 90s? I don't know if that makes any difference, but if anybody has any knowledge on that, I would love to hear your thoughts. Is it possible for a car battery just to start suddenly working again? Lieutenant McPherson has said that they could really do with the public's help in this case, asking people to come forward with any information they might have, no matter how small it is, just to be aware of their sources. A lot of information at this point is probably just a result of the rumour mill at work, but some of it could be valuable. They're willing to look into any leads at this point. Please go and follow the Finding Erin Marie Gilbert page on Facebook. They need all the eyes and ears they can get. Erin's family are not going to give up until they have answers about what happened to her, and they have raised a $35,000 reward for any information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person responsible for Erin's disappearance. And they ask people to contact the Alaska State Troopers with any information. I'll leave all contact information in the description box just in case. Like I said at the beginning, this is a really frustrating case because there really aren't many leads. There's nothing to go on here at all. I find it really interesting that the last person to see Erin now refuses to have any contact with the police at all. But like I said, if you know anything, if you know anybody who used to go to the Girdwood Forest Fair, or anybody who lives in Girdwood or anything like that, maybe share this video with them, get her name out there, just anything can help at this point. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.